Hey there, Tom Romeo from Crestron. I want to show you a new setup we created today to demonstrate 1,500 rooms in micros. So you see I've got two servers. One server has 700 rooms and the other server has 800 rooms. I divided them up so that each server belongs to its own server group and that the rooms that belong to server 4 always go to server 4, and the rooms that belong to server 3 always go to server 3. I set the max rooms for server to 800. I'm going to switch logging to debug just so I have debug logs if I need them. And notice how we did not set up micros here at all. I didn't put a port, I didn't put an IP address, I left it alone. In the all config, there are two settings that are essential. One is to set the max listener, and the second is to use the old EWS pass-through. You'll see it in a second. So here we go. EWS, it's up higher. Max subs per listener, I set it to the full 1,600. Okay? And if we go to the bottom, use old push process is set to true. Now, in this particular case, this customer is not using TLS 1.2, so neither am I. But we could just easily switch that on. Now, let's take a look at the rooms. So you see I've got two nodes, and one node has rooms 100 through 799. Notice that it belongs to the correct server group, which belongs to that server, and it also has its own connection set, and we have a Micros emulator on that IP address. Okay, and now we're going to go look at, these are rooms 800 through 1599, and you notice that they're on their correct connection set. Notice the port is 5014, whereas the other port was 5013. And we're just going to show you that the port is 5013. So I've got two separate ports running on the Micros emulator. So I've got two instances of the emulator. Now here are the connection sets. This is how we set Micros up. Now that IP address is the external IP address of an Azure VM, and this is the VM. I'm going to get to it in a second. But you see, we opened up those two ports in the network security group. Now those ports also have to be open on the Fusion server so that we can get traffic in and out, and we have to open the ports on the server that's running the emulator. But you see, there's the IP address, 52.168.73.8. $52,168,73.8. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so this is the server that's running the Micros emulator. That was the internal IP address, but you see I've got two directories. So I've got it in two separate directories, one running on port 5013, one running on port 5014. Okay, and I'm going to show you now, well, this is going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to show you now the rooms, that there's nothing in the rooms. There's no nothing on the room schedule for any of these rooms. And that is my puppy barking upstairs because she's just being obnoxious today. Okay, so you see I've got nothing on that schedule. And nothing on the schedules for these rooms either. Just takes a little bit of time to load the tree node. Okay. All right. So you see there's nothing on this calendar. Excellent. Okay. And now you see I'm on server 3, and this is server 4. So as you saw in the config, there's server 3 and server 4. They're both talking to the same database. There it is, server 3 and server 4. Right? So I organized it this way so that it's easy to split things up. But it is critical that the rooms that belong to server A stay with server A, and the rooms that belong with server B stay with server B, because when the listener spins up, we need to make sure we're talking to the correct listener on the correct server. Okay, so here we go. This is port 5014. We start with floor 8, and I'm going to do 99 rooms per floor. There's a couple little quirks with the emulator that I need to address, so I don't do the full 100. And here we're going to start with floor 1, but I believe there's only 7 floors, right? There are only 7 floors, right? We go 1 through 799. Okay, and we're going to start this listener. So now I've got 2 Micros emulator listeners running at the same time on the same server, and this server is separate from the Fusion servers, just to make it a realistic demonstration. Notice also I'm not using TLS 1.2. And look, I just received my first link start. Okay, right after that link start, I should receive a sync request. And after the sync request, I should start populating. In this case, the emulator sets every room with a 0 count. So that means there's nobody checked in any room, but it puts it on the calendar as such. So there it is, a checkout, and the count should be 0. And you'll see that on all of these rooms, we got the checkout. Okay, so that happened pretty quick. You know, I'm pretty happy with the way that emulator works. Okay, so there's our checkout. So now we're going to play a little bit. I'm going to raise and lower the guest counts in different rooms to demonstrate how the check-in and check-out works. And, you know, I believe that this is probably working correctly at the customer site, but there might be some configuration anomalies. And specifically, I'm betting that a listener for a room that is on server A is being listened on server B, and that's why you're never getting the messages. I'm betting that's what's going on. But you see what I just did there? I guessed myself in, but I did not guest Peter in yet. I didn't click the guest in yet. So now you see the count is 1. Okay, and now I'm going to click guest in. Now Peter's in, and now the count is 2. Okay, and now I could do a guest out, and bring it back down to 0. Let's see if that's what I'm doing now. I keep going to that server by mistake. We'll do one more in. Andrew Jackson. Why not? Okay, so now the guest count is 3. Perfect. Okay. Now, if I were to stop Fusion on both of these servers and start it again, I would get a sync request. Now, because I'm not connected to a real Micros, nothing's going to be retained. But you see, I brought the guest count down to 0. Whereas if the Micros system says, hey, there's somebody in this room, even after a sync request, you're going to get that count. That is the true count that Micros says it is, which is different than what the emulator is doing. Okay, so I just put Andrew in another room. And I love Vicky Vale because, you know, I'm a Batman fan. Okay. This is just to show that, we're getting the fair complement. Okay. So there's my Andrew Jackson in room 107. And if we go down to room 1203, it's hard to do that sometimes. There it is, 1203, and there's Vicky Vale. Guest count is 1. Now she's leaving, right? And bam, she's out. Guest count is 0. So my guess is, so we're going to do this again, right? I want to make sure that you've got 2 server groups and that the rooms are assigned to the appropriate server group, okay? I want to also make sure that the connection sets are set up correctly. And I want to also make sure that each room is pointing to the correct server group and the correct connection set. And once you do that, I believe all of these problems are going to go away. But you want to make sure that you segregate your rooms. Make sure that the group of rooms that belong to server A always stay on server A, and the group of rooms that belong to server B always belong to server B. Right? We never want to try to do that rebalance because we don't know where the listeners are going to end up. And you don't want to be listening for a room that belongs to server B on server A. You're never going to get your responses. And I wish this would go a little faster. I am using small VMs, so it is possible that there's not a lot of horsepower on these VMs, or it could be just, because I've got 1,600 rooms, that it just takes longer to load the tree. I don't know. But I'm just hammering it home that each room is configured correctly to stay on its respective server. And I'm just showing that, the guest out, that checkout occurred for every room when the sync occurred. So I'm not going to click on every single room, but you see as I just go through and just randomly pick rooms, you see that checkout occurred, and it occurred relatively quickly. And we're going to do another guest in, just because. And you see everything works like it's supposed to. So I believe if you've got Fusion configured correctly, that it will do what it's supposed to do. Over and out.